Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Dana Buckler Show. My name is Dana, and I'm joined once again by my good friend, author David Klein. David, welcome back. How are you?
I'm great. It's great to be back talking about a movie I've seen probably a dozen times.
I'm excited to have this conversation. This one wasn't really on the docket. You know, if you've been listening to the conversations that David and I have been having, we've been doing sort of deep dive breakdowns on movies that have been really important to us in one way or the other. You know, he's compiled a list, I've compiled a list, and we have, you know, some movies coming up. I mean, we've talked about some movies we're going to do for October and things like that. And you had referenced the movie Heathers a couple of times in different discussions that we've had. And I, having seen the movie back in the 90s, was thoroughly convinced that I had a really good grip on that film. On a whim, a couple of weeks ago, I decided to rewatch the movie. You know, like I said, you have brought it up, and it was, I need to rewatch this. I need to watch this as a 47-year-old, not as somebody who was 16 or 15 years old. And when the film was over, I stopped what I was doing, and I promptly messaged you, and I just kind of was sort of just let it all out. Like, I've just watched this movie. I've seen it before, but I've never had a film affect me the way this movie has affected me. And I'm telling you, it's the dichotomy of I really like this movie, but at the same time, this movie could never, ever be made in today's climate. Would you be up to having a discussion for it? And you were like, of course. So thank you for being on the show. Oh,
sure. It definitely still has the power to shock almost, I would say. Certain movies, I don't know, I think of Blue Velvet the same way. No matter what, it's just like, it's so kind of audacious that you take a step back. And yeah, it hasn't lost any of that power.
I want to give my brief history with the movie. I can't get a straight answer. A lot of times it says it's 88, but other times it says it's 89. I think it had its premiere in 88 or at a film festival, but then premiered in 89. I'm thinking it was released in 1989 is kind of.
Okay. I've got a review here from Variety.
Okay.
January 25th, 89.
Okay. All right. So for the rest,
it was kind of, end of 88, maybe the premiere was, and then the world saw it in early 89.
All right. So for the rest of this conversation, I'll refer to the movie as being released in 1989. Yeah. That being said, I didn't see it in 1989. It wasn't a film that I saw theatrically. It was a film that I want to say, to the best of my recollection, would have seen it the first time 92, 93. This would have been a rental, and this would have been hey, have you seen this movie? This would have been one of those, it's talked about. It's not readily available. It's certainly not on heavy rotation on television. So have you seen this movie, Dana? No, when you get time, watch this movie, Heathers. And I remember watching it as a teenager and the subtext of the film going right over my head and saying, oh, this was just a really fun movie. It was a lot of fun. That was my very underdeveloped teenage brain saying, oh, this was a kick-ass movie. And I like Christian Slater and that way he's a badass. And 30 years later watching it completely different. And we'll get into that. So that's my brief history with Heathers. David, you have a bit of a different history with the film, if you would like to let the listeners know.
Well, it's different for a lot of reasons. I did attend a screening, an early screening. It was not a big thing, but there was some press involved. I remember Christian Slater was there, and Winona and Christian did interviews, and he teased the idea that they had just gotten married. Yeah. So, the press was like, is that true? Is that real? It was just, a lark. But he was actually dating Kim Walker, who played Heather #1 during the filming of the movie. So the dalliance, whatever happened, that happened sort of post-production when they were briefly involved, whatever. Not that's so I remember some of that subtext. I remember meeting him. I also remember, so I was older than you. I was not a teenager. I was in my late 20s. And honestly, my jaw was on the floor. I was not prepared for how dark it was. She had just done Beetlejuice, which was funny but dark. So I thought, okay, it's going to be funny and dark in the same way. Well, it was funny, but it was so much darker. I was really surprised. I was totally entertained. I didn't think this is in bad taste. This is rather audacious. So, and one thing that I did, I will say that I did get this item here. This is one of my favorite artifacts, which is the suicide note that Winona as Veronica Sawyer forges. And it says, I'll read it to you. You might think what I've done is shocking. To me, though, suicide is the natural answer to the myriad of problems life has given me. I die knowing no one knew the real me.
Is that the actual one from the movie?
I think they must have done a bunch of them.
But that's Winona's handwriting.
That's Winona's handwriting, but the bow somehow got missing.
Okay.
The bow up there. But yeah, no, they must have had to kind of do the scene a bunch of times.
For that, you know what? I think we should be in full transparency because we didn't mention, and if somebody's tuning into the show for the first time, it should be noted that Winona is your cousin.
My first cousin.
Your first cousin. And so you during this time period, you were well aware that she was making this film. I mean.
Yeah. We had been aware that she had been kind of, ever since Lucas, I had been very well aware that she was succeeding in the movie business in various ways. At that point, she had done, I don't know, she had, I think it says 5 or 6 movies, but, she did something with Jane Alexander. Oh, yeah, the Square Dance was her second movie. A touching film with Rob Lowe. But Beetlejuice was the first one that really was like, oh man, this is my kind of movie that she's doing. Hooray. So I was kind of blown away, blown backwards by the darkness of Heathers. Yeah. And she was only 17 when she did this. So she was kind of that's a lot of movies for a kid to have already done by age 17 and then do something that's very nuanced. I think she made that character, Veronica, work. I think she does a miraculous thing in making Veronica as sympathetic as she is, because she does some bad things. She's very gullible, but somehow she does this balancing act that it's really quite something.
It really is. And I guess I get one more question about this time period is you're going to an early premiere. Has she even teed this up to you? Like, hey, just so you know, this is going to be a little bit different than anything I've done so far. Or are you just going into this with a blank canvas? I don't know anything about this film.
At this point, I'm mostly in touch with her father.
Okay.
Her dad was very much Uncle Mike. He's my Uncle Mike. Very much, her manager at this point. So he was sort of the point man telling me, we're filming this. She's doing that. So I knew a little, but no, I wasn't completely briefed on it at all. So I wasn't really expecting it. He would tell me things like, I remember about Beetlejuice, him saying that we don't know how it's going to be really. We have to see how it all comes out. I don't remember what the advance word was on Heather's, like whether he thought it was like a smash hit or not. I doubt that. But so no, I did go into it pretty blind.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, I appreciate you sharing that portion of the episode where you talk about your history with the movie. It's a little bit unique and to anyone else that might have seen the film. So I really appreciate that. I don't know, David, if when you and I set out to have these conversations, if we were going to focus so much on the high school experience, but it's with the exception of Swingers and The Killing, there seems to be a pattern brewing here a little bit. And I think it kind of speaks to the power of this time in our lives, something that we've all been through. And the further we get away from it, the more wiser we become to that experience and why we were the way we were. And I think Hollywood sort of got hip to the idea of, hey, we can make movies about the teenage experience and probably make a couple bucks along the way. So I just want to give you a list of notable teen movies starting in the 1950s
And if any of these really jump out to you as a potential stay tuned for a in-depth episode, I want you to please feel free to stop me. We're going to go with Rebel Without a Cause, The Wild One, Blackboard Jungle, Gidget. Into the 1960s, we have Beach Party, Bye Bye Birdie, The Graduate, West Side Story. Now, I will say of those ones I just mentioned, one seems... Which one?
I don't know if The Graduate.
The Graduate is they're listing my list here as a coming of age when I did the search. So, okay. But that one seems a little out of place.
Yeah.
Okay. Into the 70s, we have American Graffiti, Grease, Breaking Away, and The Last Picture Show, which I think all fall into that category. The 1980s, through my research, has been listed as the golden age for teen movies, largely defined by the work of John Hughes. We have The Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Say Anything. I'm going to throw my friend Phil Joanno's movie 3 O'Clock High into the mix. And then, of course, we have got 1989 Heathers. I'm missing a bunch, but please.
Risky Business seems a big one.
Absolutely.
That one seems a really big one. And I think it has a little bit of that dark 80s tone.
Yes.
That greed is good, that, just that sort of snarky self-interest is where it's at. But what's interesting about those movies is that they elicited a different kind of laugh than Heathers did.
Yeah.
Those were more standard Hollywood type laughs, Hollywood type funny situations. I think that what distinguishes Heathers is that it has a tone that it sustains from the very beginning, and it's playing by its own rules. It's got its own visual sense. It's got its own lingo, really powerfully, individually constructed. Whereas, the John Hughes movies were very formulaic. And, I just feel like this was a different tone, and that the tone of this movie was what freaked people out. And yet it became very normalized and very, very copied in subsequent years.
It was just, I wrote some notes down here, and it was sort of a response almost to the Hughes era of the 1980s films. And I feel like every time we have these conversations, I have to feel like I have to defend John Hughes, because I'm constantly saying, Hughes did this, but in the reality, it would have been like this. But here's what I can say about the John Hughes movies: 16 Candles, Breakfast Club. Not so much Ferris Bueller's Day Off, because that's a completely different film. But look at like Say Anything, Pretty in Pink. These things, they encapsulate the issues that teens have, but not really. Not on a level that something like Heathers does. And the Hughes movies always have a happy ending.
That's right. There's very little comparison. I mean, those are popcorn movies. And yeah, despite no matter what, they've got happy endings, and they, poor Molly Ringwald, but she charmingly gets the guy, and, it works out. Nothing really works out in Heathers. And that's it deals in many of these very typical teen tropes, but everyone is sort of turned on its head. I mean, they don't, the new girl in town trope. Sure, it's a little bit like that, but she's immediately sort of taken in by, obviously Mean Girls was the whole movie sort of derives from this premise.
This was right, though. That's the thing about Heathers, is this was correct in that this type of thing did go on in high schools. I mean, certainly not to this. Make no mistake, everybody, you haven't watched this movie. This is a satire. It is 100% a satire, but it's delving into themes. I think it's one of the most realistic portrayals of high school, having been through it and understanding that there was social structure in high schools. And this movie, I thought, nailed it.
Right. And you see the caste system portrayed in a lot of these high school movies. You see the jocks portrayed as bullies. You see the clueless principal of the school. Even the idea of like the girl who's not like the other girls, there's Veronica. She's different. She writes in a diary. She uses a monocle. She's obviously clever in a certain way. So she is, so that's all kind of very much standard stuff, but it just doesn't feel like a standard movie, a standard teen movie. There's no, some of the most obvious tropes are avoided. They don't have that, the makeover where the ugly duckling becomes beautiful. Yeah. They skip that one. There's not a little love triangle, but the idea of, it just seemed like there was a definite approach to try to avoid those typical things and to portray them darkly, but very realistically.
Let's get into a sort of a non-spoiler plot of this movie to the best we can, and then we will get into spoilers at some point. I will tell you that if you haven't seen this movie, there are a couple different streaming services right now, Tubi being one of them, where this movie, you can watch it. Tubi has limited ad breaks. I watched it again today. The ad breaks were like 2 for the entire movie, so it's totally worth it. So definitely take the time, hit pause on this conversation. We're not going anywhere. Watch the movie, come back to us. But David, you want to go over the plot?
Sure. Veronica is our surrogate on screen. She's played by Winona Ryder. We're immediately introduced to these 3 girls, all named Heather, who are the cool girls in school. They adopt her. She has an initiation rite where she has to do something, that a rather cruel prank on somebody, which is, and so she passes the test. And even though she knows that these girls are bad news, she can't really resist the siren call, the popularity. Then we meet sort of antagonist, protagonist, the romantic male interest played by Christian Slater, who turns out to be very dark indeed and sort of manages to seduce Veronica into increasingly dark deeds in the name of kind of getting even with the many awful people in the school. So, and in the end, she has to figure out that she's going down the wrong path. And it ends up in completely hyperbolistic terms, but she is the sort of moral center of the movie. Her arc, her evolution from going along with this to realizing the error of this kind of thinking and that sort of cruel high school matrix that life is viewed through.
Perfect. And that was non-spoiler. Good job. Good.
I tried hard not to.
That was non-spoiler. So a little later on, we'll get into some spoiler stuff because I just wrote down some notes before we kind of get into some key plot points. And I'm wondering, I could not figure it out, and I didn't want to do too much research. So I thought I'll ask David if there was a metaphor behind the game croquet. And I just, I'm just wondering. I never see that very often, but there's something about that game and how you can make a choice to continue or knock your opponent out. I mean, there was an underlying issue to that, or a subtext to that game.
I thought it was a really interesting choice. One of the first things you see in the movie is a croquet wicket, practically after you see the bow that all the Heathers wear. But yeah, it's one of the ways that the movie really has an individual flavor to it. What does croquet mean? I don't know. It's a kind of obscure game. It's a rich person's game, it seems to me. But it was so offbeat. It was so offbeat that that this was part of their life. And yeah, there is the ramifications that you can play you play to win, or you can play to sort of obstruct your opponent. And of course, we see them playing cruelly or not, as a reflection of their character.
And we get into, all right, I'm sorry. We can't have this conversation without spoilers. So everybody that's listening, we've been talking for, let's see, you got 20 minutes where we didn't spoil anything to do with this movie. So like I said, the movie is easily accessible. It won't cost you anything to watch it. Just download the Tubi app if you don't already have it. Watch it, come right back. It's an hour and 43 minutes. We'll be here when you get back. The way this movie opens up with the croquet, and then we have Veronica, who is, like we've talked about, the audience surrogate. She is our window into this world. The movie does voiceovers through entries into her journal where we kind of understand where we are. Right away in the high school, right away in the cafeteria, I'm struck with just how the Heathers, if you will, they're walking around and nobody likes them. I don't know how to describe it, David. I'm just like, I recognize they're afraid of them. I recognize them from my high school experience, if that makes sense. And the idea that every type of social structure is represented in the cafeteria. You have sort of, I don't like to use the term, but the geeks, you've got the jocks, you've got, you've got everybody in there, and you have Martha, sitting off to the side, and they play this horrible, horrible joke on her. And that just
the outcast is sitting on her own in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
There's like 3 levels. There's that top echelon of popular, and then there's people kind of caught in the middle, like Veronica's friend Betty Finn, who she sort of has to leave behind to join the Heathers. And then you've got the lowest level where you've got someone who's physically, who's heavy set and not popular and ostracized. So yeah, it's a caste system. And yeah, they establish it all immediately as they, and the boys sort of look at them with fear and horniness, it's a very powerful, they establish so much in that first cafeteria scene.
And they also establish right away that this is not going to be a safe movie. I mean, there's a line where Ram says, I'd love to, I'm not going to repeat the line, but, he makes sort of some sexual innuendos towards Veronica and Heather, and I'd love to have a Heather and Veronica sandwich like that. I mean, that's established right away. So this is right. Let's just pull the Band-Aid off. This is going to be a heavy movie with some raunchy dialogue. Crude.
With very crude, yeah. But I think that the crudeness is interesting because of the way because the screenwriter's approach, which is to sort of create a new Argot, and I feel like some of those lines are so they're so malignant, but they stick in your mind. I think it gave a flavor to these very familiar types, and then of course in Clueless, 10 years later or whatever. They've got their own lingo, right?
Yeah.
To some extent. It just seems like, but it was really just right from the very beginning. And also you get this very like a mix of tones. It's a little bit slapstick. Some of the dialogue, the repartee between Veronica and JD, the Christian Slater character, is just very kind of, 1940s slapstick comedy when, it's sort of, and the tones really shift. The very beginning, it sort of sounds funny when they're saying, I'm sorry, Heather, and it's a really deft mix of humor and drama.
When they're going around and they're giving everybody the scenario question, the poll question, the lunchtime poll, you win $5 million in publisher. And again, great use of showing us all the different students. I mean, just a clever filmmaking trick there. And there's some great lines. I wrote down some funny lines here. The one guy's talking about, well, after taxes, I'm going to clear. I love I'm going to give it to my father to invest.
Future yuppie.
Yeah, it's just great. Let's take a second and talk about JD. This is Jason Dean. This is Christian Slater's character. My personal thought is he was definitely channeling a Jack Nicholson performance or trying to.
He was. I have to admit that I read a little bit of some of the press that I read. One critic made a point that that the Nicholson thing was maybe not necessary, or that the critic said, when you do a sort of imitation or a sort of shtick for a whole movie, it gets tiresome. And it was that's me after seeing it a dozen times and thinking, maybe that's true. I thought, he's a pretty talented guy to be able to do it. And he seemed dark and desperate. And I thought he pulled it off well. It's just a curious choice. It's, he could have played a sinister bad boy without that. What do you think? It was definitely Nicholson, but
it was, and it's interesting because I'm a fan of Slater. I'm just like Winona, Slater. Those are actors that, as I'm coming up watching films, I'm watching their careers begin, and so I'm on journeys with them. And for Christian Slater, we look at movies like Pump Up the Volume, Cuffs. Which is, I can't listen. I have unabashed love for the movie Cuffs. I can't explain why.
Deep track.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a deep cut. Absolutely. But then again, True Romance, which is, I think, his magnum opus performance. Of course, that's Tarantino dialogue that he's doing. But I see a more refined version of sort of the JD character in his performance as Clarence in True Romance.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And he didn't have to do Nicholson. He did it with his, but I think that charming, sinister guy is someone he was very able to play.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that he held his own quite well, and it was he's a talented guy. I mean, he was pretty young then. He had only done but he was like a child performer. He had done Shakespeare, I think, at this point.
Wow, yeah. I remember him before this was the Legend of Billie Jean with Helen Slater, which is got that great infectious Pat Benatar song in it. That's all I remember about the movie, besides Slater being in it. Both Slaters, Helen Slater, Christian Slater, no relation. But the thing is, we're learning about the Heathers, we're learning about sort of the cliques. That's all established in the beginning of the film. And then Heather Chandler is telling, Veronica, hey, we've got that Remington party tonight. And that's, if you blow this, then you're done. You're done.
You get one chance.
You get one chance. Okay, so Remington Party. I just want to take a moment and just have this conversation about, again, a movie that kind of captures the essence of what these. It's a fraternity party. Like, make a mistake about it. It's, Remington College is a fictitious college, but it's a fraternity party they go to. Mm-hmm. And, back in my DJ days in the 1990s, late 90s, early 2000s, I was a DJ for hire, and I actually played a lot of fraternity parties because, number one, they would go late. Number two, they always paid very, very well. So I was happy to take these gigs. Yeah. But I saw things that got me to the point where I said, I don't really want to be part of this anymore, no matter how much the money is.
Like skeevy guys.
Yeah.
Taking advantage of women.
And I want to be clear that I'm not labeling all fraternity people this way.
Yeah.
There are skeevy guys in every walk of life. But for the sake of this conversation about this movie, it's very realistic. But at the same time, it's also interesting to watch Heather's demeanor change. She's no longer in control. She's no longer in power when she gets there. And that's the part I want to discuss.
Yeah, suddenly she's subservient to the male order and to playing a role. She's not. Yeah, that's very true. We've only seen her in a position of power until then.
The only power she has is over Veronica. She's attempting to have is over Veronica, where when Heather ends up having a sexual relationship with the guy, which is very just, I don't want to get into it, but it's very just, okay, let's go. Let's do this. There's a scene where she's in front of the bathroom. She's rinsing. She's drinking some water. And what I'm noticing is the sink where there's some shaving cream and a half a stick of deodorant on there. And that is just the typical college guy's sink right there.
It all really rang true to you, this whole sad little scenario.
Yeah, I just remember just going, this reminds me of what that era was like. So Veronica does not participate in going forward with why they were there. And then, again, we're into spoilers. I don't want to fast forward too far ahead, but JD comes over. They have conversations. The next thing you know, they end up at Heather's house, and they kill her.
Right. And that's when the movie takes a huge leap from, nastiness and theoretical verbal cruelty into the next level, into actual murder. So yeah, the audience is probably not expecting that. Nobody gets killed in John Hughes movies. Yeah. And that's when you have to leap along with the movie, and it's kind of telling you that, no, of course this is a satire. You can't really expect the level of naivete that Veronica has to go along with this, more than once. But she does. She gets sort of pulled into this. And the idea, basically, without spoiling everything, is the people who end up dying are so odious that the audience isn't really sympathizing with them, and it actually is more empathizing with the fact that they're gone, and you're siding with Veronica and JD until she realizes that she really has killed people, and that is no joke. And like any normal person, she feels guilty. She wants to atone. There's a few moments where she atones. When you see her visually standing clothed in a shower, just letting the water course over her. She wants to feel some deliverance from this guilt. But death is death, so it's a pretty major leap when it goes to that plot point.
And this is the part of the movie where you have to buy into this. You have to buy into where the movie's going. Otherwise, this is as, I don't want to use the term light as it's going to get. It's only going to get heavier from this part on. From this first death, things are only going to get a little bit more extreme.
It just seems like that's something that you see it so often now in movies. This thing where the people get sucked in, and it keeps on getting worse and worse and more outrageous. It just feels like such a familiar thing now. I don't know, even like Ozark.
Yeah.
Right? That, Ozark. Oh, we got this family. Oh, we're going to screw up a little bit. Oh, we're going to have to cut a corner. Oh, now we got to shoot 10 people. Now you know what I mean? It just like the slippery slope thing. It didn't, I think this was not the first. It's hard to pinpoint the first of anything, but it was kind of early with this sort of thing where it's like, okay, holy really? They killed someone? That could have been it. The movie could have been them running away, trying to cover up that death, right? But no, that was just round one.
Brilliant. That was brilliant. Yeah, no, that was good. That was good. One of the so again, they've killed her, and they're like, literally, there's a great line where Veronica says, "I'm going to have to send my SATs to San Quentin instead of Stanford," which I thought was a great line. JD, who says, "Well, what if this is a suicide?" And they concoct an idea, and it's mentioned earlier on in the film that Veronica has this brilliant talent of being able to mimic anyone else's handwriting, and that goes back to the suicide note that you held up not too long ago. But so they are able to convince the community, the school, that Heather has committed suicide, and I think the unintended consequences of what happens here is, I don't want to use the term martyr, but she becomes, Heather sort of becomes this legend where everybody who hated her, she's now beloved and she's now loved. And that's the part I really want to get into, because it's talked about kind of with each subsequent quote unquote, I'm using air quotes here, suicide that happens in here, is these despicable people get elevated to a status of endearment.
Right. It seems that this is a common response that's expected of us, to say wonderful things about people, whether they're true or not, once they die. So I think they definitely took aim at that and showed how kind of ridiculous it was. It's true. I mean, the line was it gave Heather, what was it? Heather depth, and Ram a brain.
A brain, yeah.
Yeah, but it's true though. People act. Death brings out some pretty bad responses. And maybe, we romanticize the film is the least sentimental movie, but when people die, suddenly people get sentimental. So they're kind of saying sentimentality is ridiculous and worthy of ridicule almost.
That's exactly it. And I think we're all to some degree guilty of that, of sentimentality, of things where when someone does pass, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. I don't want to get into it, but anyway, I know what you're saying. And the movie is basically saying, hey, this is what happens. We get the first of a couple really interesting funeral scenes. And let's just take a second and just talk about, and I'd love to get your thoughts, your take, if you will, on the sort of the direction of this movie. Michael Lehman, who directed the film, the cinematographer Francis Kenny, the way this movie is shot. I mean, what do we have? We're talking about like a $3 million budget. I mean, they did everything they could. They utilized every resource they had to make this movie look the way it did.
Yeah, and the look is really important, and it's established from the very beginning and that you're looking at this sort of stylized, picture perfect, sanitized American ideal. We've got the hair bows, and beautiful manicured lawns, and playing croquet, and these well-dressed characters, but it's absurd. There's some absurdity. The dialogue underlying it is there is a little bit absurd and silly. I mean, they're sort of like stumbling over the name Heather, and they just sound silly. Even though there's this regal appearance, they sound silly and limited. And so there's this juxtaposition that I think that's in this deadpan tone that is established at the very beginning, and you realize, and it's a little bit reminds me of, I think, Edward Scissorhands in a way was similar, that he was looking at this sort of candy colored suburban America, and the sort of, I don't know, the darkness underneath it or something, but of course not nearly as dark. But I find a similarity there in this sort of this Technicolor America, and whatever Blue Velvet was also kind of had some of those bright candy colors, and just the idea that there's ugliness lurking below.
I want to mention this, but I also understand sort of the polarizing climate that we live in right now in 2025. But it needs to be noted that this movie does take place in Ohio. Okay. Ohio being, for the most part, a pretty conservative area. I mean, obviously, your big cities, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, stuff like that, probably be a little bit more liberal. But this movie takes place in sort of a small town, Ohio. And I'm just, again, the decision to set the story here. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that, because I know the movie was mostly in the LA area, but set in Ohio.
Well, I think it's a depiction of middle America, and I think it was very much, the screenwriter Daniel Waters was basing a lot of this on his own experience. I don't know where he was from, but I think they needed that. This was a sort of, like the idea that it's played for laughs, but
yeah.
The big signifier of gayness is a bottle of mineral water.
He says, in Ohio, if you don't have a brewski in your hand or something to that effect,
Right. So I think maybe you needed those sort of bland middle American values to play off of. I guess whatever Clueless takes place in L.A. I guess,
yeah.
Among the elite hip kids. So I think maybe you needed that level of sort of conformist America, no one breaking any ground, very traditional, values and traditional, blinkered notions of what gay people are like and stuff like that.
So then we get into what I'll call sort of the Kirk and Ram situation, where you have I say sort of the next Heather up, which I know that's very insensitive to say that, but the next Heather up with this one is going to be Heather
McNamara.
Lizin Falk. So she has been invited to go out with Kurt and Ram. Kind of understood why. She's being asked to go out, and she's asking Veronica to come with, and please, Veronica, you got to go. And I love they do the smash cut. We talk about this all the time, where she's like, they're just going to want to go out and do cow tipping again, blah, blah. Cut to cow tipping.
That's something you don't see in movies a lot, but It's very real.
Have you ever been cow tipping?
No, Dana, I have not.
I have not.
Another pleasure. You?
I have not. No, I have not. I know it's a thing. When I lived in Tennessee, I knew there were people that went and did it. I think the people who are unsure of what cow tipping is, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, because if you know better than I don't know, is that the cattle sleep while standing.
Yeah.
And you just push the cow over.
Yeah, they're completely inert. And, with a couple of people, you can push them over and have a great time.
Maybe I'm just missing it. Maybe I've never really caught the appeal of it. But hey,
it's what bored teens do when they've got nothing else to do.
Absolutely. So
I mean, it sounds like something that some of the kids in Last Picture Show would do, who are also bored out of their minds, right?
absolutely, yeah. Makes me want to reevaluate when I was in high school if there was anything that we did that looking back might be considered, hey, maybe you shouldn't have done that. Oh, you know what we used to do? We used to egg houses.
Yeah,
on Halloween. You know,
there was a tradition growing up in Tenafly that the night before Halloween, I remember it was like I felt like I was in the Warriors.
Yeah.
Because there was like it was dark and there was like people had eggs and shaving cream and some of the kids were way bigger than you. It was like mischief night was dangerous. But yeah, it was completely acceptable. And you saw the cop car and then you split and ran off into some neighbor's yard and that was it. Very antisocial.
I'm just not trying to go off subject here, but Halloween in Nova Scotia, I'm telling you right now, you knew the risks. If you went trick-or-treating with your friends as a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old, you knew the risks that the older kids were out there, and you were probably going to come back with egg all over you. And your parents, these were acceptable risks to get the candy, David.
Hey, it was like Dazed and Confused getting paddled. Yeah. These kids had the right to hurt you, to brutalize you, to really manhandle you and whatever, injure you. Yeah. But it was accepted. Now it's absolutely nuts. I mean, it's just I still find that part of my childhood so remarkable that we were so unsupervised and left to our own devices. But that's another discussion. That's the one thing I think that, because I know you're a couple years older than me. We come from slightly different eras, but I think our childhoods were very similar. But that's a discussion for another podcast. Sure. So you have Heather basically hooking up with Ram, Kurt wanting to hook up with Veronica, saying nope. Veronica ends up leaving with JD. The next day, Veronica finds out that Kurt and Ram are telling this awful thing that happened. And again, saying that they had sex with her.
Yeah, basically. That they had a threesome. And that speaks to, again, high school. You would hear those kind of rumors.
Sure.
Whether they were true or not, you believe them. And a lot of times they were not true, but they were definitely prevalent.
Yeah, and now you get the millions of stories about kids killing themselves for real because they've been bullied this way, because they've been portrayed as a slut, by people because they went out with someone after that other person broke up with them. You know what I mean? That kind of garbage. It's so common now. So yeah, the suicide trend here is different. Now you get suicide of the bullied,
I wrote this in my notes for, would this get made later on? And I wrote the social media angle, meaning that this movie was a pre-social media landscape. Things would have been. We'll get back to that when we get towards the end with the question of could this movie get made. So then we get into Veronica finds out what happens. JD and her come up with a plan.
JD manipulates her
very much so
to get her in league with him to take revenge against these assholes, but not to the extent of revenge that he has in mind.
She thinks that at best they're going to be embarrassed,
right?
They're going to be humiliated, and so then they set up basically. And JD says, these are German bullets. My grandfather grabbed a bunch of these from World War II. They just break the skin. It's a 44 Magnum he's loading there. I mean, you can just look at the bullets and tell that's what they are. I found it interesting, though. He convinces her that these bullets will not hurt. Well, they're not going to kill you. But she still chooses to not actually shoot him, just to fire the gun, in his direction. Because he even says, you missed him. She goes, yeah, but it was worth it just to see the look on his face.
Right. I think that they want to make sure to absolve her, to make it clear that she's really she's not getting it. She's not out to hurt anybody. She doesn't think she's actually hurting anybody.
Yeah.
They needed to make it clear. And in lines like that, make it clear.
And this is where the movie turns in. This is where JD turns into Michael Myers. This becomes like a slasher scene. He hunts him down. She ends up killing one of them.
But thinking that she's using
exactly.
The bullets.
Say that one more time, thinking that she's using the what?
Ichluga bullets.
I love that.
Yeah. I don't speak much German, but I remember that.
Again, I have to circle back to your first time seeing this. You're in a theater with the people that are in the movie, right? Like, what is going through your mind?
I was, like I said, my jaw was on the floor. I just thought would never heard anything. I mean, so many of these lines were just cut through. I was just amazed. Like, I don't know. I've always been fascinated. Since you've read my book, you'll know I've always been fascinated by the Hindenburg disaster. So one of the great repeating lines in this movie is "Oh, the humanity," which comes from the crazy, feverish, play-by-play guy who's describing the Hindenburg approaching the mooring mast in Lakehurst, New Jersey, and then burst into flames, and he's freaking out, and he ends it with just saying, "Oh, the humanity," and it just those three words always just sort of carry a lot of weight for me, and I just thought it was so interesting that they managed to use it that way, and there was a million some of the lines just so I don't know. Heather one talks about reindeer games. A brain tumor for breakfast. I mean, these are just sort of such spicy little locutions. But yeah, to me, but intelligent, talking about reindeer games is quoting from, fucking Christmas song. And "Oh, the Humanity's" quoting from the Hindenburg disaster. These guys had a really interesting palette that they were working from.
They really did. And again, it just kind of speaks to the brilliance of this film. We cut to Veronica and JD in the car where they're arguing over, and she takes the cigarette lighter and
she sticks it into her palm
Yep.
because she suddenly realized she's killed somebody.
Yeah.
And she wants to punish herself.
And then, so she burns herself, like you said, she burns herself because she realized what she's done. And then here's JD, and he lights the cigarette with the palm of his hand.
He's got a cigarette in his mouth, and he leans over, takes her hand, and lights his cigarette off it. And then I feel it really is a powerful, I think of like un chien andalou, slicing the eyeball. It's just there's a lot of ways to visually shock, but I don't know. That was quite a shocking moment. And so then they argue, and he's trying to convince her, that it's okay, and she wanted to do it, and he won't shut up. And so I love this. My favorite bits. She takes her hands over her ears and she goes, "Mary had a little lamb, little lamb, little lamb." Anyway, I just texted her today and I said, "Was Mary had a little lamb an ad lib?" And she wrote back, one word. "'Twas."
Oh, I love that. Love that. See, we get some inside baseball here. That's
inside
great.
Baseball. That's all I got for you, folks. I've got the a couple of artifacts, but I thought that was pretty cool. I always thought that was just such a funny thing that people do, and it just seemed so natural the way she did it. And so there you have it, folks.
Love that. I love that. That we get to the funeral, and again,
one of the funniest funerals.
It really is,
right?
And this is the part where I'm always trying to be sensitive to the topic on hand, but I can't keep it together during this funeral sequence. Like it's hilarious.
Glenn Shaddix, who was hilarious in Beetlejuice, plays the priest or the religious guy, the religious person leading the service, and with just this crazy religious consternation and hilarious, thoughts on the real reason why they died and all this stuff. But it was cartoony as hell, but it was really a hilarious cartoon all the way through.
But they've got just the fact that they've got the football helmets on, and there's
a great sequence where each character goes to the open casket and you hear the thoughts in their heads. Yeah. And each one is just really hilarious in their portraying the characters' sort of complete self-involvement, their lack of real concern, and it just skewers them hilariously. Just a brilliant sequence.
And of course, his father tells everybody, "Look, I don't care that my son was gay. He's my own flesh and blood. I love him. I love my dead gay son." That's the line.
"I love my dead gay son" has got to be that's one of the, to me, top 10 lines from Heathers. But it's tough. There's a lot of competition.
It's one of the lines that I remember before rewatching the film, some 30 years later. I always remember that funeral scene where the father says that. I just remember that particular moment. But there is something that happens in this funeral where, JD makes a joke about, well, his father knew about blah, 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 and she laughs. And then you have the sister of one of the people that had died turning around in tears. And I think that's the moment that just kind of really hits Veronica.
Yeah. It's a little girl. They're sort of narking in back of the funeral, and a little girl with tears running down her face looks back at them and gives them a look, and suddenly she doesn't feel so happy, so jovial anymore.
So she decides to break up with him, and he doesn't take the breakup well. This is, he gets into this whole thing where he blackmails Shannon Doherty's Heather, which, by the way, can we verify this? I read in my research, she didn't know this movie was a comedy and was really upset when she saw the premiere of the movie and stormed out of the theater because she was mortified that this was a comedy. And if you watch it,
she thought
this was a serious drama.
And when they played it for laughs, she was completely unprepared.
She was completely unprepared. Watching it with that understanding, you kind of see this performance in her where, if that's the case, you kind of see it. She's it's a very dramatic performance that she gives throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, and she's only in scenes with the Heathers much, and she comes in to, remember they're televising one of the funerals, and she's over at Veronica's house, and she's completely unmoved by the death, and but I don't know. I mean, you know what I mean? And that seems like I guess you could read that as I'm playing the cruel bitch character, right?
I've taken over the clique.
But still, I don't know. I still feel like some of the dialogue was obviously sort of deadpan funny that maybe someone else would have picked up on it.
Oh, it's interesting. I mean,
it is. I guess it's reminding me of, movies are done in pieces. And when you're just taking,
and they're not typically filmed in chronological order.
Right.
Right. So
if you're only seeing one piece of it, I guess you wouldn't know how the whole thing is going to play out. It's not easy. I mean, those scenes, her motivation was, the conflict in those scenes was clear, and she was playing a character who knew what she wanted, and I guess she didn't think she was doing it for laughs. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. So I guess I just, you obviously get the scene where Martha has a failed suicide attempt,
right?
And
the bullied girl who the trick is played on at the beginning, and the calf, just life keeps on getting worse for her, and so finally she not because suicide is trendy, but because she wants to die, kill herself.
I put a pin in that because I always talk about how the John Hughes movies always have a happy ending, and this movie obviously has a very different ending than a typical John Hughes film. But there was a happy moment for Martha at the end, which
and that's all you need, and that's all that would work with a movie that dark. And in the original, the school does get blown up.
That's correct. All right, so let's talk about this. So we get to the point where JD has this elaborate plan. Ends up, blackmailing Heather Duke into getting all the signatures of the high school. It's this elaborate plan to just blow up the whole school and blow up everybody. And Veronica is the only hope the school has. It's a great scenes back and forth. But you're absolutely correct. From what I read, there were two things that were different about the ending. Number one was in the original script, he does blow up the school. And number two, I read that in the script that Martha ends up shooting Veronica and calls her Heather. You're just a Heather, and shoots her. And Veronica, her last gasps are laughing about sort of the irony of the situation. I don't know if any of that was filmed or if that was just, in the script stage. What are your thoughts?
I remember that, and it makes sense. The original version of Misery, Kathy Bates, he has no feet. He doesn't just get hobbled. He has no feet. And they were like, you know what? we can't show this character hobbling on no feet after. And I think that's sometimes you have to make those calls. And I think they probably changed it by the time that screenplay was written. I think they decided they wanted to. My guess is that they probably said, okay, we can go pretty fucking dark here, but we don't have to end that way. No, and then I think they still, as dark as it was, well, critics couldn't handle it because it was too harsh and too cruel. But it would have been that much harsher and that much crueler if that was the ending that they went with. I think there was a touching moment. I mean, yeah, when Veronica survives this explosion, basically, explosion happens, but doesn't destroy the school. But so she looks like she's come back from a battle. And then there's a touching moment with Martha at the end, who is in a wheelchair, but she survived. And there's that little, so that's a little hope, but it's not a big happy ending. It's not a big smile. It's the prospect that they get to keep on, that they survived almost, and that they could maybe just hang out that evening.
I wrote this down. I have a theory about that ending that didn't happen. And I wrote pre-Tarantino versus post-Tarantino, meaning that by the time we get to Pulp Fiction in 94 and we've got the rise of this type of movie, I think if this film comes out post Pulp Fiction, we get those original endings. I think that literally there was a shift in the mid 90s to that type of bleakness, a return to the early 70s, if you will, where our main characters don't survive the story. That's just a theory I wrote down.
I think it makes sense.
But
I do think that does make sense. I think things only got darker. Literally 5-6 years later, there was a lot of movies that were like, that were funny and dark and disturbing. Like, Cable Guy.
Very Bad Things. Do you remember the movie Very Bad Things?
Yeah.
That's what Cable Guy, yeah.
I think it suddenly was really safe. The floodgates came open for movies about unlikable characters or ordinary people doing really bad things. I don't know. I thought of Shallow Grave, the movie before Trainspotting, Danny Boyle. These sort of ordinary people find money, and it's like Lord of the Flies. What are people capable of,
Is that the one? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off there. Is Shallow Grave the one? Is it Ewan McGregor and they take on a roommate? And there's money involved. I saw that in the 90s.
Roommate drops dead. They find a suitcase full of money.
That's it.
And they all eat each other. I mean, they all descend. All the evilness, the greed takes over. But it was really, it was a nasty, kind of a nasty film. And I just think nasty is a good way to describe these. Heathers, when I was at Vassar, the clique were known as the Nasties.
Huh.
Not nasties, nasties.
Nasties, like that. Okay.
Like Long Island Lockjaw version. So yeah, I think these like nasty people were elevated and suddenly people wanted to spend time with them. Whole movies with these nasty people. I mean, I wrote down, you were talking about teen movies. I was thinking about black comedy movies. And I think that predating them, Death had been, Harold and Maude played Death for laughs, right? Yeah. He commits Harry Carey. He hangs himself. We have a false hanging in Heathers. These things that happen, but Harold and Maude, not the best example, but movies like MASH, Catch-22, Death was kind of a funny thing. Eating Raoul, remember that one?
Eating Raoul,
Raoul was basically like Sweeney Todd.
Okay.
Only this nerdy couple starts killing swingers. They put ads. It's very John Waters kind of premise,
Okay.
So it's definitely going more mainstream, this sort of nasty kind of underbelly of ordinary people doing awful things. So there's definitely a tradition for it, but I think Heathers was in 1989, when you think about all those 80s teen movies, really did something audacious and new. And I think that its influence kind of took a few years. Took some time, but it definitely happened.
Do you have a theory as to why this movie wasn't as successful as it could have been at the box office?
It was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
It was too dark. It didn't give moviegoers in 1989 what they were expecting or what they wanted. They wanted to laugh more. They wanted to be in on the joke. They didn't want to be the people who were getting parodied. Nobody escapes. The teachers are incompetent and apathetic. The parents are ineffectual. Nobody is really portrayed as virtuous and good. So I think it was that dark cynicism that was a little ahead of its time in the 80s. And then it really, people got very comfortable with that sort of nihilism. Come on, Pulp Fiction, when I forget the character who gets his head accidentally blown off, and the whole joke is, how do you clean the car?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, that's fucking dark, but we were laughing.
Yeah. Travolta goes, oh man, I shot Marvin in the face. That was, whoops. Whoops.
Yeah. So that was 94. That was literally 5 years later. And that was such an influential movie that suddenly everyone was doing it. You had these killing Zoe. I don't know, all these just really nihilistic, everyone's killing, doing crazy shit, you know. True Romance was good, full of violence and nihilism. Yeah. But, you know, just sort of reveling in an ugliness. But I just think it was a little bit, we were still in the John Hughes era at that point.
Yeah, well said. I just want to say that I struggle with this movie, and not in the sense of saying, do I recommend the movie? I do recommend the movie. I don't struggle with the movie in the sense of, do I think it's good? I think it's a very good film. I struggle with this movie because it's way more accurate than I think people give, the film credit for. I think it is a very honest portrayal of what it's like, of the high school experience, which I believe in the world of social media has only gotten more extreme. And that's why I struggle with the movie. And I it's a strong recommend. Everybody should watch it. Be prepared. Know what you're getting yourself into. If this conversation that you've just listened to for the past hour hasn't teed you up for what type of movie it is, be prepared. But the reason I struggle with it, I say that as a compliment because it is such effective storytelling for me. I
couldn't argue with that. I think it stands up, and there's a reason why there's a successful musical. Yeah. Been made out of it, because there's something about the story, the originality of that story. Those three girls, and honestly, it was the peak of these guys' careers.
Yeah.
Daniel Waters and Michael Lehman. They still worked, but honestly, they next teamed up on Hudson Hawk. I'm not going to say that's an undiscovered, underappreciated gem. They didn't do much of anything great after that. They didn't, and I feel like there was so much promise. It's funny, even in the mostly negative review by David Denby in New York Magazine, he says, I'm not sure, all this criticism, he's like, nevertheless, Michael Lehman might be turned into a future Brian De Palma, a director of lurid, melodramatic, blah, blah, blah. There was some, and the screenwriting, I just think, was so unique and powerful, distinctive. He didn't do much either, Daniel Waters. So I think they just both peaked. It was a peak thing. And that's one of the reasons why it stands up today, because sometimes you get your one shot and you do your best work, and they were firing on all cylinders, and they managed to remake the whole teen movie, and to make a lot of those other ones seem incredibly cliche, almost like the same way that Dewey Cox, this is the Dewey Cox story, makes so many current biopics seem ridiculous, because they nailed so much of this stuff.
That's the best. I'm not laughing at what you said. I'm laughing at the Dewey Cox thing, because I remember seeing that in the theater and having the exact same reaction. Like, they just nailed it.
I'm never going to see a biopic the same way again.
I can't. Everyone's always asking me, hey, did you watch the Bohemian Rhapsody biopic?
Yeah, me too. I got up. No way.
No, I was like, no, I can't do this. All right, David, here's something I wanted to throw in here. Okay. So Heathers is 1989. Okay. Here's what comes after Heathers. All right. We have Dazed and Confused. We have Clueless, American Pie, 10 Things I Hate About You, Mean Girls, Superbad, Juno, Bring It On, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, Easy A, Lady Bird, Booksmart. And when we get into the 2020s, we have, only thing I found on the list here was a movie called Bottoms, which I have been told by people's opinion, I really trust, that's a really fun movie, really funny. And they did a 2024 musical adaptation of Mean Girls.
Yeah.
So
seems like a continuum that you can definitely trace back to Heathers.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem all far-fetched.
The only movie that I realized that is not on this list that kind of has Heather-esque elements to it is Can't Buy Me Love. And I only mean that from the clique side of things. This is where Patrick Dempsey pays the girl $1,000 to go out with him for a month so he can be amongst the cool kids. And then,
well, guess what? I've not seen this movie.
Oh, okay. All right. So
there are limitations even in my own cinematic experience.
I would invite you to watch that movie.
Okay.
Because it's a perfectly harmless, it's right in the middle. It's like 1987. It's right in the peak of this time. And it's a very safe movie. It's right PG or PG-13. Like it's not a Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Heathers, like an R-rated movie with a lot of salacious material. And it's a PG-13 breezy movie, which again has the happy ending that is going to happen. But it's fun to watch Patrick Dempsey in the 80s when he was considered sort of like a nerdy guy to where he has, kind of come to his career now. It's interesting to watch him in the 80s. But
title again?
Can't Buy Me Love. So, but there's some cliques in it that are reminiscent of Heathers.
Interesting. Yeah. I'll check it out.
All right. Perfect. Anything else you want to add about the movie before we wrap up?
I just, over the pandemic, I read Moby Dick.
Oh.
And I'd have to say it's one of the greatest books I've ever read. I was amazed by it, but I really did not get the Moby Dick stuff. Moby Dick was sort of, in a leitmotif throughout the movie as a sort of, somehow having to do with suicide. I didn't really get it, but it was just one of the interesting quirks that were part of the flavor of the movie that gave it some texture.
So I have never read Moby Dick, so keep me on the straight path when I say this. It's about a man obsessed with catching killing a whale, correct?
The whale who wounded him, who took it.
Okay. Captain Ahab is his name.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the themes of Moby Dick? I'm trying to find that parallel in real time with you.
Moby Dick, you're seeing it all through the eyes of this call me Ishmael, who signs on to be a deckhand, basically. So you're just seeing all this drama and how that they're out doing a whaling expedition, but Ahab takes them far beyond what they were supposed to do in search of this whale. He can't stop. So basically, he's, we're watching this out of control, obsessed captain, taking, and the fate of this entire boat, the whale can destroy it, but he's chasing it. So he's leading, I guess he's leading on a suicide mission. So maybe that's it. Maybe he's on a suicide mission. But it was interesting that I don't know. It was an interesting touch that one of the first things we see in that croquet game is Heather McNamara, or the Shannon Doherty character, holding and reading a copy of Moby Dick.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to read the book. I have to read the book.
Well, a lot of people find it super challenging. Yeah. I think his power of his words are so freaking powerful, and there's something so charming about this character. Ishmael has this wonderful character that I got myself pulled along, and I didn't, eventually go, I can't. I have to put this down. I was really wanted to keep going. So yeah, well, we can talk about Moby Dick one of these days.
All right, perfect. All right, so this was a great conversation as always, David. Thank you.
As always.
So we're I do want to point out that I have, like in every episode, included a link to the first time David was on the show. Hear a little conversation about his book, The Plus One, which I am in the process of reading for a second time. So I'm really, really enjoying it. So, David, thank you. Thank you for doing the show. Thank you for sharing some inside baseball about this movie. It really means a lot.
Oh, man, it was really, really fun. I love doing this. Looking forward to the next time, even if I don't know anybody in the cast.
Right. That's fine. That's good. That's good.
Entirely possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So for everybody listening, my name is Dana Buckler, and we will definitely talk soon.